So apparently the Barbie movie has everyone all riled up, including Bill Maher, right? And listen, I have nieces. So before I let them just go watch something that could have some type of brainwashing agenda in it, I need to see what's going on and see what everybody's talking about. So do you if you haven't been up on it. If you knew, you know what to do, subscribe. Let's check this out.
Bill Maher's Barbie review is in. I bet you were all waiting for that. The comedian did not mince words. He wrote in a lengthy piece on Twitter, quote,
Wow.
"Okay, Barbie, I was hoping it wouldn't be preachy, man-hating, and a hashtag zombie lie. Alas, it was all three. What is a zombie lie? Something that never was true, but certain people refuse to stop saying it."
Now, I expect the man-hating, aspect of it. You know what I mean? Barbie Ken, that whole aspect. I expect that to go on, all right? Anything else?
Lie, something that never was true, but certain people refuse to stop saying it. Or something that used to be true, but no longer is, but certain people pretend it's still true. Barbie is this kind of zombie.
He continues, spoiler alert, Barbie fights the patriarchy right up to the Mattel board, who created her, consisting of 12 white men. The patriarchy, except there's a Mattel board in real life and it's 7 men and 5 women. Okay, not perfect, even Steven, but not the way the board in the movie, which takes place in 2023, is portrayed. And not really any longer deserving of the word patriarchy. Yes, there was one, and remnants of it remain, but this movie is so 2000 and late. Maher was met with both support and ire on Twitter. One user replied, quote, "Barbie hurt Bill Maher's feelings so much that he looked at how many women are on the board of a toy company." However, Maher did earn the...
Hey, when you sit down and think about it, I wouldn't have been able to probably point that out in the movie. I wouldn't have saw that and be like, hold on. All of them? Yo, that's just pettiness at its finest.
Backing of tech giant Elon Musk, who replied, quote, "Why do they keep pushing these lies?"
Elon Musk replied to something on Twitter. How rare.
I'm breaking. So, look, I gotta say, I largely am with Bill Maher on this one.
Whoa!
So I did a Barbie review on my podcast a couple weeks ago. People can find that in full over on Bad Faith YouTube. And my audience also rebelled against me over this. I also agree. I think Ben,
Dreyfus?
No.
Colin?
She glitching.
Right, conservative.
Dominic?
She glitching. She in the Matrix. She need to be unplugged.
Talks very quickly. Come on. Anyway, Ben Shapiro, sorry. Ben Shapiro.
Okay.
Ben Shapiro also made a similar kind of criticism. And Ben Shapiro pointed out what the board dynamics, the ratio of the board gender-wise was. So he probably got it from the Ben Shapiro video. That's how I know what the composition of Barbie is. But here's the overarching point that I think was legitimate. Even though Ben Shapiro was criticizing the feminism in the movie from the perspective of, I don't like feminism, I think that the points that he made specifically about how feminism was cringe in the movie are correct. My argument would be that it's a very simplistic, dumbed down, almost offensive version of feminism. And I would agree with Bill Maher that they tended to make up controversies in the film, like fake patriarchal controversies, which isn't necessary because there's real patriarchy in the real world. So if you make up a fake patriarchy and then you can shoot it down as not really what's reflected in the real world, the impression that you can be left with is that there's no gender hierarchy remaining in America and the women are all complaining about nothing. And I think that's what's really pernicious about the film.
I mean, I've said before, I liked it. It got good reviews.
Where did we just take this? I'm worried about any type of brainwashing or anything like that. You know what I mean? But a whole patriarchy and designing a fake patriarchy and shooting it down, and now you're putting out this false sense of this and women just complaining and Question for y'all. Should my nieces see this or not? Is it okay? I'm gonna look in the comment section and let's see what the poll says. But let's keep going. Crazy.
Who's in my group of people who went to see it, which included my wife and some male friends and some female friends. We all quite liked it. I do have some issues with the politics of the movie, for sure. Actually, my criticism of the board was that from a structure, storytelling structure point, they were very weird. They just...
Take them out!
They were unnecessary, and they were supposed to be in the real world. I thought a lot of the comedy was coming from, it's a fish out of water tale, from a magical realm transported to the real world, having to confront the harsher, not idealistic reality.
Yes.
But then the board, the company, Mattel specifically, the board, all the interactions in that building were weird, as if they were also taking place in the fantasy world. I don't know why those characters were so weird. It's Will Ferrell.
Will Ferrell was reprising his role as Mugatu.
It's my guy.
Yeah, right.
From
which obviously in the entire universe of the Blue Steel guy is Zoolander. That whole movie is weird.
Yeah.
But here it's supposed to be the comedy and the drama comes from a difference.
It's magical surrealism to realism, but now in the Barbie in the Mattel building, it's blurring those lines again. So my biggest problem with all of that was that the movie ran long. There were a lot of different plots going on, and as much as I love Will Ferrell, if you go back and cut every scene with Mattel and Will Ferrell in it, nothing will change about the movie.
Yeah.
Like nothing will. So what ends up, you think going into the movie that he's going to be the antagonist.
Yeah.
She gets into the real world. Mattel obviously can't have people know that there's real Barbies in a Barbie land. So you got to put her back in the box. But they drop that conceit almost immediately.
Ken is the antagonist of the film.
And that's where my major problems emerge. Because Ken was obviously the star of the Barbie movie.
Yes.
I should preface this by saying, I enjoyed the movie. So don't come at me like you just didn't get the movie. You're a sex.
It was too woke.
I enjoyed it. I had a good time at it. I would recommend that people go and see it. But the reality was, I feel some kind of way as an actual feminist about Ken being so much better, more compelling, and interesting as a character than Barbie. And I think the reason why is because...
Did she just... Huh? Bro, I'm worried about, okay, is there all type of politics, innuendos, maybe shots at Trump or Biden, different things like that, making any type of undertone racial, like stuff like that. Anything going on in that? Other than that, okay. I think sometimes we go off the ledge a little bit. So I'm looking to y'all. And you know what I mean? I haven't seen it. But what it sounds like is to me is I need to watch it first before I allow my nieces to watch it. I need to watch it first and to be sure. Because I'm kind of feeling like she's taking it a bit too far. But I'm still kind of hesitant because I've seen a lot of headlines about it. I just never clicked on a video about it until today. Make sense? So hearing this makes me a little bit apprehensive, but at the same time, I'm wondering if they're taking it too far.
There was a preciousness about Barbie as a character. They wouldn't let her be genuinely flawed outside of the patch of cellulite on her thigh, which we were supposed to find to be horrific. But they wouldn't let her, they kept everything that was troubling her and all the other women in the movie very abstract.
Yeah.
America Ferrera, who's our ostensible protagonist in the real world, whose sadness is the root of why Barbie is sad, right? Why she feels like she needs to go to the real world and figure herself out. We're told that she has all these problems. We're told that she gives us this speech at the end of the movie that's supposed to be rousing all the Barbies to action about how much sexism is in the world and how hard it is to be a woman and what a struggle it is. But at no point in the movie are we told what her struggles are. Is her marriage having problems? We don't see her husband except for 5 seconds at the end of the movie. Is she struggling financially? Is she struggling to keep a roof over their head? Is she being abused, discriminated against at work?
Well, the best they suggested is that she was just having a hard time feeling some disconnect from her daughter.
Okay,
but that needed to be fleshed out a little bit more.
But that's not a woman issue.
Yeah.
That's a parent issue.
It wasn't a woman issue.
Teenagers are terrible, and parents struggle to raise them. That's a pretty universal conceit that has nothing to do with feminism. So why is it this rallying cry, like a "I am woman, hear me roar"? Why, if that's supposed to be the root of her, of the apotheosis of the self-realization of all the Barbies? It doesn't track for me.
Before they went in we're going to talk about feminism and make it about how women feel put down and paid less and all that. Yeah, it seemed to me more like the conflict was coming from feeling estranged.
Oh, so it did have a feminism undertone to it in it. So okay, I gotta tough it out and sit through it. I never imagined myself watching it, but for my nieces, I'll do whatever I need to do to make sure that they not getting, you know what I mean, brainwashed with some type of movie, and then they bombarded me with all these questions, or later on I see them emulating the movie. So yes, I'm convinced now that I'm watching it first.
from her daughter, and and they were gonna have this bonding experience and her daughter will see that her mother was once a girl who enjoyed Barbie as a girl and also enjoyed the experience of introducing her own daughter to Barbie. But then that does get dropped in the conflict.
You mentioned being paid less. Was Maher Ferreira paid less than she was due?
Right, I'm just doing feminism platitude.
No, but I'm saying
things. I don't know.
those are real issues that the movie never. By the way, someone on my show, Leslie Lee III, a cultural critic that I really enjoy, he pointed out that the only real woman in the film, they made her like a secretary to the head of Mattel. Those are choices. Moreover, we're skipping past the main concern that a lot of people had with it, which is that, spoiler, the plot is that after having seen the real world, Ken
oh yes, I have thoughts on this. Barbie Land is an apartheid state.
Yeah, okay.
Where the Kens have no political representation.
Let's get into it.
It seems like they don't have housing or real jobs.
So let's set it up a little bit. So Ken realizes that the real world has patriarchy, which he sees as a good thing because in Barbie world, the movie tells us, the narrator tells us, this is not me reading into the movie.
It's a matriarchy.
The narrator tells us a matriarchy, that the purpose of Ken, like in a reverse origin biblical myth, Adam and Eve, the purpose of Ken is to serve Barbie and to love Barbie.
Yes.
That being said, Barbie...
And not receive love in return.
Barbie is indifferent to Ken in the movie. Barbie, it seems like the movie is almost afraid to let Barbie have romantic interest because they think that's too stereotypical for girls or something to be driven by romance. But if you have a character whose explicit design is to be a partner to Barbie, it then starts to feel cruel when Barbie doesn't reciprocate.
Not cruel when she doesn't reciprocate, and cruel bordering on not humanitarian when after the Ken Revolution, like the revolutions of 1848, this is vigorously, stridently put down, and they say, could we have weensy political representation? And the Barbies say no.
No.
They say no. I read an article in Ms. Magazine or some feminist rag being like, we love Barbie Land because there's no violence, there's no guns. I'm like, yeah, there's no guns. If the Kens had guns, this revolution is sticking. This shows why guns are necessary for political revolution.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, but I would say that the movie overlooks why it is that in most societies, men are able to enforce patriarchy and be dominant. The idea of sexual
because they have genitalia was another problem here because they didn't. That was reference. They don't have it. I'm not sure what even there is the conflict between men and women stripped of their actual.
What I was trying to say is that I think that in real life there's forced. There's the threat of violence, like physical violence and being overwhelmed physically by men who are stronger. And the movie, outside of having her butt get slapped when she's in the real world, never really confronts that reality. And I think, again, neuters what women in the real world face and why it is that men are able to be dominant. In the movie, when you take out the threat of violence, right, the Kens basically come back from the real world and say, we're in charge now. And the Barbies just say, okay. And so how do you explain in a movie, we've been told that the Barbies are astrophysicists and novelists and they're brilliant and they're scientists and they go to the moon. But the Kens just show up and say, well, we learned about patriarchy and we think we should do it. And the Barbies go, sure, Ken. And we're supposed to think that that's normal. Well, the movie tries to explain this. Do you remember how the movie tries to explain how the Barbies just rolled over?
By saying they have been anesthetized against it.
Yes.
They need to be confronted by monologues and then they'll realize that they would rather have agency.
Specifically, there's a line that got a lot of blowback from the Native American community that says, just like Native Americans and smallpox, they've never been exposed to patriarchy, so they had no innate defenses against it. That one line is supposed to explain why a whole society where all the Supreme Court is Barbies, all of the president, the leadership, everyone is Barbies. Apparently, I would presume the cops, everybody's Barbies. But if Ken's just float an idea, 20 minutes later, all the Barbies are giving them foot massages and handing them brewski beers on platters with little maid outfits on. And then how to get out of it? How do the Barbies get out of it? Ingenuity, physical strength, nothing. They decide to flirt with the men and then pit them against each other by giving the romantic attentions to yet another man so that they get jealous and then they have a war with each other, during which they go and take back the Supreme Court.
All of this took place. Ladies, I'm speaking to the ladies. Would you allow your daughters to see this movie? Did you take your daughters to see this movie? What did you take away from this movie? How did it make you feel? Would you watch it again? Would you recommend it to somebody like myself who has nieces? Would you do that? I need to know. I need to see that because she's breaking down some good points. Some points I'm like, okay. But she's making some good points right now. And I'm like, whoa, all of that type of stuff and some of that type of stuff is in here. Some of the other stuff, I'm like, okay, the movie got to have some type of plot, right? And it's going to kind of be a certain way to in order for them to sell it, they got to cause some type of controversy. I get that as well. You know what I mean? So, y'all let me know.
Heartfelt accurate. I couldn't quite find a fault with the pit the men against each other thing.
It was fun, but on some level, the Barbie movie, while allergic to the idea of having a healthy, equal relationship between anybody, even between Barbies, let the Barbies date each other. I don't care. It's not about men. The movie seemed allergic to the idea of romance at all. But instead of using their mental prowess that we're told throughout the movie exists, at least by virtue of their jobs, the only tool that they have is their feminine wiles to lure the Kens into turning on each other. That's feminism?
I don't know what it is, but it's not equality for Kens, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But I liked it.
I also liked it. I enjoyed it.
It had weird politics.
Especially the beginning of the movie. I thought visually it was beautiful. I think a lot of the sight gags were really funny. The 2001 Space Odyssey. The Ken fights were hilarious. Ryan Gosling was so talented, so funny, and so charismatic. But I think that they should have left the feminism out of the movie, not because feminism is bad or wrong, but because they just handle it so poorly. It made me root against it for 2 hours.
Rooting for a sequel where the Kens finally achieve their political liberation. Maybe a two-state solution, maybe their own
Kingdom.
Ken place. Yeah.
The New York Times broke the story, and what they obtained is what was meant to maintain as a secret confidential memo within the Trump plotters' circle. Now, this is actually written by one of the people named by Jack Smith as a Trump co-conspirator, identified as Kenneth Chesebro, and we'll have more on those co-conspirators tonight. But you see right there on the memo his name, as he says, the plan was to, and remember, the Electoral College has voted by December 14th, all of this is settled, and yet, in plain English, I'm going to leave it on the screen, this is conspiracy evidence right here. The plan was to, quote, deprive Biden of the electoral votes he basically had won, to keep him under the 270 votes that he'd already won, but to somehow engineer a fraud or a plot to create the pretense of the appearance that he didn't have them on the 6th. And this lawyer in private admits it's a bold, quote, controversial strategy. Now, this circulated in early December. And talk about receipts. Some of this was happening in secret at the time. Some of it stayed secret for a long time. But as we learned bits and pieces about the elector fraud plot, there are journalists and investigators who kind of said, wait a minute, this is bigger than it first looked. This is a real kind of crime that's spilling out in the open. Not the only, but one of the first was Rachel Maddow, our colleague. This was just within a week here when she reported on some of these events in real time.
Wisconsin cast its electoral votes for Biden and Harris today. Pennsylvania cast its electoral votes for Biden and Harris today. Georgia, Arizona. But it did get weird. I mean, in Arizona, I kid you not, Republicans in Arizona sent a forged certificate of ascertainment to the National Archives in Washington, pretending that they were the real electors from Arizona and their votes for Trump are real and should be counted by the United States Senate. Literally, they sent a forged document.
That's exactly right. You can see it up here on the...
So if this is true, how does anybody make it out of this and not be put in jail? I've heard stories about the whole electoral college situations before and how they are the citing votes and everything like that, but never, I've always thought it was some shadiness that could take place, but you always have that in the back of your mind, especially when you feel like the candidate that you were going for didn't win. You know what I mean? You start putting all these conspiracy theories together in your brain, but never have I personally witnessed anything like this. This is crazy.
The screen in comparison. Forged. Fraud. Rachel was drilling down on that at a time when many people were saying, oh, it's over, let Trump make his noise, we'll move on. She was saying, wait a minute, if it's a forgery, that's not only news, that's potentially illegal. That's a problem. It was many months later when the Congressional January 6th Committee got those notes together, conferred with the archives and had received them. You can't send fraudulent documents to the government. Not for any reason, by the way. You could do that on any government form that's illegal. And there's a hierarchy to that. Because if you do it to the IRS about money versus doing it to the DOJ about guns and drugs versus doing it to the National Archives and Congress about stealing a federal election or the presidential one, yeah, you're going up the line with your fraud. Now, there were apparently Trump fans who were fraudulent electors that were also lied to. If you watch this show, you may recall I mentioned this, that Jack Smith, in either his precision or his fairness or whatever you want to call it, makes very clear in the indictment that while he sees some people doing crimes and wants to hold them accountable, he was very precise of saying it seemed that some of these rabid Trump fans were lied to. And again, if you're lied to, you might not be on the hook for the criminal standard of indictment. Very simple example before I move on. If somebody comes over to your house and says, hey, you just moved in, you're new in the neighborhood, I made you some cookies, and they give them to you and you receive them and you don't know that they're pot cookies or heroin cookies and you have them in your house, you don't actually meet the criminal standard of guilt because you weren't trying to have a drug item in your house. It's quite the opposite if you and your friend conspire to take a box of drugs around. And so Smith, very simply, very fairly in the indictment said some of these people were lied to. Now,
yeah, but you still got to prove that that person dropped them cookies off to you, right? Man, but I hope you got a Ring doorbell or something that shows them coming in, handing them to you. Otherwise, you're going to have a tough time trying to say, well, the neighbor across the street, what? At that point, isn't it your word against theirs?
now to the new memo. A co-conspirator, who we know as Giuliani, falsely assured some of these individuals their certificates would only be used if the defendant succeeded in litigation. I should say that's how Smith mentions it, attributing it to Giuliani. And the memo discusses the same goal, that basically, you know you're doing something bad or potentially a conspiracy if you have to not only hide it from the world, but hide it from the people involved. And again, in an abundance of fairness, it's a separate question ethically, morally, or whatever, if you don't like or want to criticize people who are playing games with the elections, right? That's kind of in the public debate. But it's another thing to say that some of these electors, for whatever reason they felt that they loved Donald Trump and wanted to do what the campaign asked, ultimately felt like people who went to Trump University, like people who worked for Donald Trump, like people who were contracted to work in his hotels. It's, yes, an old story, although the stakes were pretty high this time, that they were bamboozled, they were duped, they were lied to.
We were duped.
Michelle Lundgren is the 9th name on the list of accused fake electors charged by Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel.
We were told to come. They needed us, and we went, and we were given cake and coffee. We were called by a member of the Republican Party. Be sure you come. We really need your help. The scam was bigger than all of us.
That's a Trump fan realizing the scam.
Now the important thing to see is who comes to your aid. You know what I mean? That's just see who really has your back in these situations. The people that you were going to bat for, whatever side you were on, in a situation like that. See if they. I got a strong feeling they're gonna leave them out to dry, and that's sad.
Bigger than her, and that she would be used and discarded or sent off to prison like so many others. Now, that's an open case where the Michigan Attorney General actually feels, and I should say legally concluded, that those people should be responsible. My point is not to resolve all of this tonight. Indeed, anyone accused is going to get their day in court. My point is to very precisely say that we have a new memo which adds even more details to how much they knew they were doing something bad and secretly conspiring it to do it. Then they take all that stuff, they wanted to jam Mike Pence with it so he might reject the electors. And then the other plot, that again, if you remember our arrows we've shown you, is the state legislators they hoped would somehow get involved and use sham investigations or references to fraud or dead people voting or the elector stuff to somehow thwart, delay, or stop what was going to happen, what did happen, which was, of course, President-elect Biden becoming President Biden. Now, there are people who underestimated this at times. I don't think anyone here on Earth One, as our colleague Nicole says, anyone in reality can underestimate it now. Because it was a coup attempt with a violent insurrection on top. And as I've told you before, even a bloodless coup attempt is an illegal attack on democracy. You add in a violent insurrection, you have something we're going to be dealing with for years. Unless we don't deal with it, and then it will become something that might be in bounds and we lose our democracy. It's happened in many countries. So that's why we've all been pulling these strands. I showed Rachel, I showed some of the other reporting, I showed the investigations. Whenever we can, we invite people on to explain themselves here. We try to give them ample time. We try to do it fairly. And sometimes their own statements seem to incriminate themselves. That was the case for one of the few people who was in the White House up through the 6th and the 20th, Donald Trump's hardcore, longtime loyalist, Peter Navarro, and he discussed parts of this plan right here on this show.
The remedy was for Vice President Pence's, the quarterback in the Green Bay sweep, to remand those votes back to the 6 battleground states.
So, you've lost the election, you've lost all the court battles, but you prop up fake scam election investigations and some fake electors. You try to jam them into the 6 and you try to send it back to the states. At a minimum, you're abusing the system and power and fraud to try to at least delay the certification. Now,
my thoughts is I think they're going to pick somebody to take the fall for this. You know what I mean? And it won't be Trump. I think somebody else is they're going to pin it on somebody else. And that's scary to even think of, but we ain't never seen nothing like this. So we got to just continue to watch and see how it plays out.
New memo, again, I'm going back and forth between what happened, what we knew, and this memo that the Times just got a hold of, has a kind of a self-criticism in it. I don't know why Kenneth Chesebro included this. Maybe he was worried that he would be standing out all alone, looking pretty wild, even among this sort of coup team. So he went out of his way to put in writing that the very plan, which Jack Smith calls a conspiracy, that he was proposing was, quote, kind of wild /
creative? He did not say creative. Wow.
Creative. I'm just going to leave that there.
Right.
Now, the New York Times has also pointed to an email from Boris Epstein to a Trump lawyer that discusses these fraudulent alternative votes and that they should call them alternative. That's a better term than fake votes with the smiley face. Now, again, if this were a movie or a story or a play or a cartoon, you could dismiss it all. You're like, this is just sort of, Keystone Cops, clownish. But this was all quite real. And smiley face or not, messaging or not, spin or not, we know what it led to. We know why it's now indicted as a coup conspiracy. Now, Mr. Epstein discussed the plan as well when we asked him about it on the beat. Now, here's a bold assertion as well from this new revealed memo. An invite to print and even TV journalists could be invited to cover the event so that fake electors would sort of try to make it look like a real thing. Now, again, we're going from this newly revealed memo, which builds on his previous memos and some of what the Jan 6 committee found, to footage like this. So in some places, as I told you, they were lying about it, duping the people and saying, hey, keep it secret. But in other places, like Arizona, they said, well, let's make it look official. Hand out some papers, sit around a table.
I can't believe this.
Highlighted at the time.
This can't be true.
Uploaded the video online, and they were committing what would appear to be election fraud at the time.
This can't be true.
Now, you've seen this before.
Yeah.
This is something that Donald Trump mastered. It's somewhere between political propaganda and reality show hijinks. If you're going to do the bad thing anyway, then the more you publicize it, launder it, and make people aware of it, tired of it, fatigue them out, the more that later you say, hey, this was no secret. How could it be bad if it wasn't a secret? And the answer, of course, is, well, that was your strategy. And the bad news for some of the co-conspirators is we're seeing it in writing in the memo. That was their strategy. Chesebro says there should be messaging that presents this as a routine measure. But the memo says it wasn't actually routine. That even if the Supreme Court actually took a case like this, they would end up ruling the power, of course, lies with Congress, not this ridiculous bananas vice president theory, which Pence and others rejected. And there was no evidence of mass voter fraud. The memo also comes around the same time as two previously reported memos, as I mentioned, which suggest this is part of a big coup conspiracy. The cover-up attempts show the Trump camp knew that as well. So yes, you can give legal advice, and yes, you can go on TV or out in public and give speeches full of lies. You can do those things. But if you start writing down your illegal plan, if you start writing down the details of how you're going to lie to everyone from the government on out, you might be telling on yourself. You might be writing down something that isn't really a memo at all.